Hello, 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 my lovelies, and welcome back to a Cozy Book Nook. I gotta stop dancing. Last week we had Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. I personally liked it. I was surprised at how well it meshed, the new and the old. It was a nice little read after last week's, or the week before, after the last one. Alright, sorry, I got my notes. I liked this one. Alright, 18th, 19th, I think it's 19th. 19th century England. Overrun with the sorry-stricken, aka zombies. The story follows Miss Elizabeth Bennet and her family. Mr. Bennet wants to raise nice, good, zombie-killing warriors. Mrs. Bennet wants to marry off all the children. Story starts. A Mr. Bingley comes to town, and Mrs. Bennet hears that he makes something like £5,000 a year or something like that. And she's like, I'm throwing my girls at him, and he better choose one. So at the ball, there's a ball. That's where Jane, the eldest Bennet girl, meets Mr. Bingley. They hit it off. The ball is unfortunately infiltrated by zombies, and the Bennet sisters kick some ass. At this ball, Elizabeth, the one the story follows, meets a Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy, and he a dick. He's considered rude, and he actually insults her to her face, and she takes an immediate dislike. Time passes. Jane and Bingley get closer. Jane actually went to visit Mr. Bingley. She ends up getting attacked by zombies and ends up getting sick. She doesn't get the disease or anything. She doesn't get infected. She just catches a cold because it was raining. So she ends up having to stay at the Bingley's residence for several days until she gets better. And then when she gets better, she goes off. But anyways, they just get closer and closer and closer, and then all of a sudden, Bingley and company decide to up and leave the countryside and don't come back. Of course, Jane's heartbroken. She thought she was gonna get proposed to, yada yada yada. Alright. Life goes on. A militia arrives into town soon after that, and the younger Bennet sisters become uniform chasers. Jane and Liz are like, oh my god, no. But even Elizabeth becomes friends with one of the officers named Wickham. He's a douche. But he doesn't look like a douche. He doesn't act like a douche. He's one of those secret douches. He basically, He tells Elizabeth Bennet, he tells her that he knew Darcy, he grew up with Darcy, and Darcy screwed him out of an inheritance. That word. That makes Elizabeth dislike Darcy even more, because she doesn't know Wickham's a douche. She's got this nice little mask put on. A Mr. Collins, her cousin, comes for a visit. Mrs. Bennet doesn't like Mr. Collins because after Mr. Bennet dies, Mr. Collins ends up getting the estate because there's no sons or whatever, and Miss Bennet automatically dislikes Mr. Collins. He's a parishioner. He comes to visit. He comes with the intent of marriage, actually, and he was gonna ask Jane to marry him, but then he finds out that Jane liked Mr. Bingley, and so he moves to Elizabeth, and Elizabeth's like, haha, no. So he then meets Elizabeth's friend, Charlotte. Charlotte's like 27 or something, and she ends up marrying Mr. Collins. They go off to London, or someplace near London. What Elizabeth found out was her friend Charlotte was so quick to accept the marriage proposal because she had been bitten. And apparently it's in this fiction, being bitten doesn't change you like right away. It takes several months to even a year. They get married, they go off. Mrs. Bennet even hates Charlotte now. Liz is actually happy for her friend. After a while, Liz goes and visits her friend because she knows her friend won't have much time left. And when she's visiting her friend and Mr. Collins and staying at the cottage, she meets Lady Catherine Debeau. They go over for lunch quite often, and then she meets Mr. Darcy. She still despises him, and she somehow, I forget how she finds out that Darcy actually helped keep Jane and Bingley apart. Elizabeth was furious, and she's like, I'm gonna cut off his head. So, no sooner than she decides this, he literally knocks on the door and lets himself in and wants to discuss something with Elizabeth. Before she can cut off his head, though, he proposes marriage to her. That threw her off a little, but not enough to refuse him. Didn't throw her off enough to refuse the proposal with a kick to the face, basically. Quite literally. So, they're arguing and physically fighting, and he's like, what the heck, why? And she's like, you're a jerk, you screwed over Wickham and you screwed over Jane. And he managed to hold her off. He left. The next morning she's out for a walk. He apparently the night before had written a strongly worded letter that was quite lengthy, and he hands it to her and walks off. She reads it. She finds out Wickham was a dick, tried to con him out of more money, tried to elope with Darcy's little sister, that's a dick thing to do. And then the reason he kept Jane and Bingley apart was when she was sick, he thought she caught the plague and was going to turn into a zombie, and then realized, oh shit, I made a mistake. But besides the plague thing, Mrs. Bennet wasn't one of the most civil. Basically, Jane's an embarrassment because her family's an embarrassment. Darcy's words were, only the two older sisters, aka Jen and Elizabeth, were of decent caliber. So Elizabeth, she takes a big old bite of that humble pie. What else? Lizzie goes home. Darcy goes wherever. Life goes on. Then it's like normal family stuff. Fast forward to the trip. Elizabeth ends up going on a trip with her aunt and uncle. They were going to take a tour of the country, but because of the zombies and whatnot, they end up only going to an old town that they were at. While they're at the old town where they met and whatnot, they go to Pemberley Estate, which, aka, that's Darcy's house. He's not supposed to be there, but of course he shows up. While they're on the tour of the grounds, they actually get attacked by zombies. Elizabeth is kicking butt, and then somebody joins her, and lo and behold, it's Darcy. And he was super civil and nice to the aunt and uncle, and Elizabeth was like, wow, I was really wrong about this guy. I'm an idiot. I wonder if we can patch things up. Life laughs in her face, and she ends up getting a letter. Lydia, the youngest Bennet, ends up running away with Mr. Wickham. She finds out her dad went to find her, and like the uncle, they need the uncle to go and find her. Like she's going to go tell her uncle about this, Mr. Darcy pops up, and he's like, "What's wrong?" Because she's so upset, and she explains everything that happened, and he goes and gets the uncle. They end up going back home. The uncle goes to London to help look for Lydia and Mr. Wickham, yada yada yada. It's like a week to 2 weeks. They can't find him. The dad comes home. Lo and behold, not long after the father comes, they get a letter. They found Wickham and Lydia. They were living in sin. Basically, Wickham agrees to marry Lydia. You find out that Wickham actually got hurt badly in a carriage accident and became a quadriplegic. So after the wedding, Lydia and Mr. Wickham come to visit. Lydia lets slip that Darcy was at the wedding. Elizabeth writes to her aunt and is like, explain why Darcy was there. Her aunt spills everything. Darcy was in charge of... He found Wickham and Lydia. He bribed Wickham into marrying her after he couldn't get Lydia to leave. He's paying a $1,000 allowance every year, and he's also the one who made Wickham a paraplegic. He made him lame. He also made Wickham go to Northern Ireland to become a parishioner, and learn to be a parishioner at some sort of institute, and Lydia's perfectly okay with this. Elizabeth is like, holy shit. She feels horrible because she misjudged him so harshly, and all this other jazz. So shortly after that, around springtime, Darcy and Bingley end up coming back to the country. Bingley and Jane end up resuming their courtship. Like a week later, Bingley finally proposes. While they're super happy about the proposal and all that good jazz, a rumor apparently started going around that Darcy and Elizabeth were engaged. So Lady Catherine, Darcy's aunt, shows up at Elizabeth's house, is like, you're not marrying my nephew, my daughter is, to unite the houses, and yada yada yada. And they end up, Lady Elizabeth and Lady Catherine end up fighting. Elizabeth ends up winning. Catherine's like, fine, kill me. And she's like, nope, that would upset Darcy. Come to find out, on the way back into town, Darcy found Lady Catherine all bloodied and stuff, and she told about Elizabeth and how she was too weak to kill her, yada yada yada. But Darcy was like, oh my god. And he's like, she cares about me, she knew it would upset me. So he goes, they talk, he ends up proposing again, and they all live happily ever after. That's basic plot discussion. I was, once again, pleasantly surprised on how well the old story meshed with the new story. It, like, the zombies didn't overrun it. It was just like a nice little add-on. It's nothing like the movie. So if you've seen the movie and you're like, oh, that movie was shit, or whatnot, it doesn't follow the movie at all. I found out that there is a sequel and a prequel, not written by the same guy, but the same publishing company. I don't know, I might have to read those. It actually came with discussion questions. Pride and Prejudice and Zombies is a rich, multi-layered study of love, war, and the supernatural. We hope these questions will deepen your appreciation and enjoyment of the towering work of classical zombie literature. 1. Many critics have addressed the dual nature of Elizabeth's personality. On one hand, she can be a savage, remorseless killer, as we see in her vanquishing of Lady Catherine's ninjas. On the other hand, she can be tender and merciful, as in her relationships with Jane, Charlotte, and the young bucks that roam her family's estate. In your opinion, which of these halves best represents the real Elizabeth at the beginning and at the end of the novel? Both of them, because she's a multifaceted human being and she's able to feel more than one emotion? 2. Is Mr. Collins merely too fat and stupid to notice... Is Mr. Collins merely too fat and stupid to notice his wife's gradual transformation into a zombie, or could there be another explanation for his failure to acknowledge the problem? Yeah, he might actually love her and not want to admit that something bad's happening. If so, what might that explanation be? What I just said. How might his occupation as a pastor relate to his denial of the obvious and the decision to hang himself? Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot to mention he hung himself after Catherine had to be beheaded. He might actually, love his wife and have been heartbroken that she turned and kept that big of a secret from him. And when he had to literally cut her head off, it might have scarred him and he might have been hurting and he might have acted hastily and ended up killing because he chose to hang himself in one of Catherine's favorite trees. 3. The strange plague has been the scourge of England for 50 years. Why do the English stay and fight rather than retreat to the safety of Eastern Europe or Africa? Because they're obstinate and stubborn. It's a pride thing. Resources, because if they immigrate into other countries, they'll then be immigrants and they might not be treated properly, or might offset the resources. Who receives the sorrier fate? Wickham, left paralyzed in a seminary for the lame, forever soiling himself in studying ankle-high books of scripture, or Lydia, removed from her family, married to an invalid, and childless, yet forever changing filthy diapers. Lydia. No. They don't have... They made their own beds. They deal with it. They got what they deserve, and they deserve each other. Due to her fierce independence, devotion to exercise, and penchant for boots, some critics have called Lady Elizabeth Bennet the first literary lesbian? What? Do you think the authors intended her to be gay? If she was gay, then why did she marry a guy? And if so, how would this... I can't say that word. Twist serve to explain her relationship with Darcy, Jane, Charlotte, Lady Catherine, and Wickham? First off, she's not gay. She ends up marrying a guy. Maybe she's bi, but I don't know. But devotion to exercise and penchant for boots doesn't make you a lesbian. A tomboy, maybe. Not a lesbian. Wow. I'm not touching that question. Some critics have suggested that the zombies represent the author's views toward marriage, an endless curse that sucks the life out of you and just won't die. Do you agree, or do you have another opinion about the symbolism of the Unmentionables? Okay, hang on. No. Don't even give me that shit. Because, literally... Hang on, where is it? Okay, fuck it up. I'm gonna look it up on Wikipedia. You literally go to the background on Wikipedia. Quirk Books editor Jason Recklook developed the idea for Pride and Prejudice and Zombies after comparing a list of popular fanboy characters like ninjas, pirates, zombies, and monkeys with a list of public domain book titles such as War and Peace, Crime and Punishment, and Wuthering Heights. He turned the project over to Seth Grahame-Smith. Quote, called me one day out of the blue very excitedly and he said, all I have is this title and I can't stop thinking about it. And he said Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. For whatever reason, it just struck me as the most brilliant thing I'd ever heard. Graham began with the original text of Austen's novel, adding zombie and ninja elements while developing an overall plotline for the new material. According to the author, the original text of the novel was well suited for use of a zombie horror film. They did it to appease the masses. Don't give me that shit. There's no deeper symbolism or meaning to this shit. They did it to appease masses. Come on! 7. Does Mrs. Bennet have a single redeeming quality? In her own weird way, she does care about her daughters. She's an idiot about it, but she does. 8. Vomit plays an important role in Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. Mrs. Bennet frequently vomits when she's nervous. Coachmen vomit in disgust when they witness zombies feasting on corpses. Even the steady Elizabeth can't help but vomit at the sight of Charlotte lapping up her own bloody pus. Do the authors mean for this regurgitation to symbolize something greater, or is it a cheap device to get laughs? It's neither. It's what happens when we see things that are disgusting. It's a human nature. It just happens. In these contexts. Stop trying to read into shit. Sometimes, when an author writes, the drapes were blue, the drapes were just blue. It wasn't meant as symbolism. Is Lady Catherine's objection to Elizabeth, as a bride for her nephew, merely a matter of Elizabeth's inferior wealth and rank? Or could there be another explanation? Could she be intimidated by Elizabeth's fighting skills? Or is she herself secretly in love with Darcy? Or is she bitter about the shortcomings of her own daughter? Probably A and C. Why the hell did you even write B? No. 10. Some scholars believe that zombies were a last-minute addition to the novel, requested by the publisher in a shameless attempt to boost sales. Others argue that the hordes of living dead are integral to Jane Austen's plot and social commentary. What do you think? Can you imagine what this novel might be like without the violent zombie mayhem? Yeah, it'd be like Pride and Prejudice, the original Jane Austen, written in 1813 instead of 2008. You know? It would be the original novel instead of the one you grabbed because of its free domain. Idiots. And that is it. So, that was Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. And you're gonna pop open, aren't you? Yes, you is. 2 is The Other Side of Midnight by Simone St. James. 307 pages, 34 chapters. My significant other bought this one at the used bookstore as well. Oh, England again. London, 1925. Glamorous medium Gloria Suter made her fortune helping the bereaved contact loved ones killed during the Great War. Now she's been murdered at one of her own seances, after leaving a final message requesting the help of her former friend and soul rival, Ellie Winter. Ellie doesn't contact the dead, at least not anymore. She specializes in miraculously finding lost items. Still, she can't refuse the final request of the only other true psychic she has known. Now Ellie must delve into Gloria's secrets and plunge back into the world of hucksters, lowlifes, and fakes. Worst, she cannot shake the attentions of handsome James Hawley, a damaged war veteran who has dedicated to himself to debunking psychics. Backflap! As Ellie and James uncover the sinister mysteries of Gloria's life and death, Ellie is tormented by nightmarish visions that herald the grisly murders of those in Gloria's circle. As Ellie's uneasy partnership with James turns dangerously intimate, as insidious evil forces begins to undermine her quest for clues, a force determined to bury the truth and whoever seeks it to expose it. So, that's next week's. I'm gonna end the video here, guys. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and give me the answers to those discussions in the comments below. If you agree, disagree, have completely other ideas, let me know. Alrighty. And remember, guys, stay shiny and keep an eye out for the next video. Ciao.